Thank you all for being here today. Welcome to gardening season. I know it seems early, but it really is time to start. So here we are. And I've missed you all, so let's get this party started. So most of you know, but let me introduce myself. I'm Tess Hoke. I'm a garden educator and real food mentor. And today, believe it or not, is my first Zoom experience. So as I go through this, thanks for any patience and kindness I need to ask from you as we go through this. But this is really cool, a brand new platform to share information with all of you who are working so hard to grow your gardens. I just want to make a big shout out. I want to shout out you. Thank you so much for your excitement, for your dedication to learning this skill called growing a garden. It really is at the center of a strong and vibrant and sustainable community. And your willingness to learn is beyond belief. And so I ask today, please take from me what you can. Learn it, practice it, share it with everybody you love. Because as things happen in our world, pandemics, crises, it is these simple skills, these valuable things, especially learning to grow food, that really makes us vibrant and resilient to whatever might come at us. So we're doing all this together, and I am just really grateful to you for your willingness to learn this skill. Okay, so that's kind of all those housekeeping deals. I want to get into the good meat and bones of this. I think it's time to get our garden party started. So before I get my hands in the dirt with you, and we are going to plant some seeds today, I want to answer the number one question that I get asked this time of year as a garden educator. And that question is, what is it time to start? Well, the answer, my friend, can be found on the little seed packet. Now, this is probably the most unutilized piece of gardening information we as backyard gardeners have in our seed starting tool belt. It really can answer most of the questions we're going to cover today. All we have to do is learn how to interpret that information. And so that's what I'm going to share with you. Walk us through this planting and show us how to use this to answer the questions that are going to come up for us. So I imagine before you and I arrived here today, we've put some thought into our gardens. What do we want to grow this year? And maybe we've gathered together our seeds. If you have not yet ordered your garden seeds, I just want to give you a piece of advice. Please do so ASAP. One of the things that I know is that garden seed companies are feeling immense pressure again this year, and many of them are selling out of seed. So please do order your seeds as soon as you can if you haven't done so already. It's going to really behoove you to do it. So we've thought about our gardens. We've thought about the crops that we want to grow. Maybe we've already got our seeds together, and now it's time to start. But the question is, what should I start? And so let's take a peek at the seed packet and let's learn how we can interpret it to answer those questions. So I've got here in front of me a tomato packet. This is a little guy called Moneymaker. I love that idea. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to use this to decide if this is a seed that I should start today or when is a better time for me to start it. So first I'm going to look at the back of my packet and I'm going to notice that it's going to tell me when to start inside. This one says it's recommended, so that's a good start. It's also going to say it takes 4 to 6 weeks before transplanting that I want to start the seed. So now I need to know one more piece of information. I need to know when that last frost is going to happen in my garden. Now obviously we're not going to be able to pinpoint the exact day, but we are going to be able to use an average. And there's something for us home gardeners called the last frost date. And this is data that has been compiled over decades and decades of time by researchers and scientists and backyard gardeners like you and me. And what it is literally is an average of the last frost that you can expect to see in your garden in the spring and the first frost that you can expect to see in your garden in the fall based on your growing region. So if you want to access this sort of information, all you do is got to Google that, and believe it or not, it's going to pop up and show you where you are gardening, and it'll give you that information. So really, really good piece of advice for you. So I'm gardening here in the Methow Valley. Maybe you're gardening here too. Maybe your garden is somewhere else. But for me, my last frost date, according to the last frost date chart, is the last week of May to the first week of June. Now, I know here we are in February, and that seems like pretty darn late. But remember, this data is an average. The last frost could come earlier, and it could come later. But we've got to start somewhere, so we're going to pinpoint it and call it the last week of May for us. So I'm going to look at the seed packet again, and I'm going to now know another piece of information. Start this 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. Well, I know now that that's the end of May. So if I'm backing it up, the 4 to 6 weeks is, say, the middle of April. Really? I can start this tomato as late as the middle of April and still get tomatoes? Well, technically, I suppose that's true, but there's some more information we want to interpret to make a good decision. One of them is it's going to tell us how many days it's going to be before the seed emerges. And for this little tomato, it's going to take it 5 to 10 days before it emerges once I planted it. So let's just call that a week. And now we're going to back this up another week or so. So now we're like early in April. I could start this as late as April and still probably get some tomatoes. But there's yet one more piece of information that this seed packet is going to help us with and really shine some light on when we're going to decide to start these tomatoes. And that is the days to maturity. Every seed packet is going to tell you how many days it's going to take from the time you transplant that out until you're expected to see your first piece of fruit from the tomato plant, for example. This one is saying 75 to 80 days. Well, let's look back to my last frost date. Last week of May, 1st of September, so that's about a 90-day window. This tomato is going to take almost all of the season before it starts growing any ripe tomatoes. And if you've ever grown tomatoes in your home garden, you know that one of the saddest things is that your tomato plants often have a bundle of beautiful green tomatoes that have yet to ripen, and the frost just kind of takes care of that. So what if we put a little more thought into this and think, if I back this up even further from the first part of April and gave my tomato plants a chance to be bigger transplants before I planted them out in the garden that last week of May, then theoretically I'll have more time to ripen even more of my tomatoes before that killing frost comes in September. I think that's a really good idea. How much more time should we give them? Well, friend, that's going to be up to you. But here's a little piece of advice I would like to give you after 25 years of starting my seeds indoors. And that is, the simpler you can make this process, the better you're going to be. So here we are. It's the first, where is it? It's the 6th of February. Wow, that's pretty early. I know, now that I've translated all of this information, that I can start these tomato seeds really in March, still have enough time to grow a big, beautiful transplant. So I'm thinking instead of a first grader size in my garden, this guy's gonna be a junior high size guy when I plant him out at the end of May. So I'm thinking I might hold off just a bit on my tomatoes, wait until March, save myself this extra effort that I really don't need to expend because that's gonna be a big enough transplant anyway, and sort of put the tomatoes aside for a little bit longer, okay? That's kind of a little idea how you can glean some information from a seed packet. Let's do that again with another kind of plant. This is a flat leaf parsley. Ooh, I don't know if you can see that. It's a little bright here. So this is flat leaf parsley. I love flat leaf parsley, and I highly recommend you grow it if you're a parsley lover and like to bring that into your kitchen. So let's look and see what this seed packet suggests I do. When to start inside? Ooh, 6 to 8 weeks before my last frost date. Okay, we now know my last frost date is at the end of May. 8 weeks back puts me at the 1st of April. But there's another piece of information I want to digest. How many days between planting the seed and emergence is going to happen? And on this one, the days to emergence is 14 to 28 days. That's almost a month that this seed could take to germinate. So I'm going to do a little calculation. I'm going to think, okay, I better back it up another month to give me some more time, and that brings me to the 1st of March. But remember, we've thought, how big do we want our transplants to be? We want them to be kind of a junior high guy size. So I'm going to take it back even further, a few more weeks maybe. And I'm thinking, here I am in early February. I think this is a good one to start today. I'm going to start my parsley now. Then I have some onion seeds. Now, I've been saving seeds, and remind me, later we're going to talk a little bit about seed saving, but these are some red storage onions that I've grown over and over in my garden, and I like them. I just don't have the seed packet today to refer to and decide when I need to start onions. But let me give you a piece of information that you can tuck in your gardening tool belt and refer to anytime you want. Onions like to be started early. And here's why. The bigger your transplant is that goes into the ground, the bigger the onion bulb is that you're going to harvest later on in the season. And onion season, the harvest happens earlier than, say, tomato harvest season, which means that I need to start my onions earlier so my transplants can be a really nice size. So starting onions early now is a really good choice. I think I'm going to start onions today. Okay. We're going to cover a little bit more of that later in the Q&A, so just tuck any questions aside. Later on, we'll ask you to raise your hand, and we'll get to some questions there. But that gives us a little idea of how to interpret that part of information from the seed packet. I think it's time to get our hands dirty. So what I've got today is some pots. Now, one of the things that you're going to need to do is gather some planting pots that you want to start your seeds in. And here's the fun part. Believe it or not, you can use about anything you want. I've got here, let's see, this is a standard little 4-pack nursery pot. You can get them at hardware stores, garden centers, maybe you've got some back in your tool shed, but they work super well for starting. They've got little single cells, and I like them. You can also use, these are kind of new and fun, these little dehydrated compressed potting soils. All you do is you soak them in water, and voila, they puff up into a beautiful little what would you call this? A little bundle of joy that you can stick a couple little seeds in and go away. It's got some mesh around it so it holds the soil together. I've never yet done them myself, but I'm going to try them this year. If you're gardening with kids, they love things like this. This is just an egg carton. They work really well. I've cut off the top, and it's got all of these little cells, and kids find them adorable to plant seeds in. They also work really well because when you get them moist, they hold the moisture, and your little seedlings tend not to dry out so fast. And this I found under my sink. This is, from all of those fresh greens you get at the market, but these work incredibly well. All I need to do is poke a few holes in the bottom and fill it with soil. It also has a lid on it that's going to come in handy in a little bit later, and you and I are going to get to that. So I think today I'm going to start my tomatoes because, not that it's time necessarily to start tomatoes, I might wait a little longer, but because I'm going to use these tomatoes as a demonstration for the next class that I'm going to offer for you and me. We're going to be able to continue on in the next class where we leave off today. So I'm not going to leave you high and dry on what to do. You and I are just going to take some seedlings, and we're going to continue along in the next class. So I've got some potting soil. Let me grab it here. And here's the most important thing I would like to share with you about starting your seeds in soil. It really is important to choose the right seed starting soil. And by that, I mean seed starting soil, not potting soil. There's a difference. Seed starting soil is actually a soilless mixture. You can find these at hardware stores, you can find them at garden centers, garden catalogs. It's pretty common to see this. And again, it's a seedling mix. And why this is so important to use, why I choose this instead of potting soil, and potting soil is literally soil. It's composted material. A lot of times it has fertilizers and soil microbials in it. That's not what we want to do for our seedlings. We want to start our seeds in a soilless, sterile mixture. Because remember, these little fellas are going to be indoors. We don't want them exposed to a lot of toxins or a lot of chemicals or a lot of live microbials that will bring on mold and maybe bring on death to our little seedlings. So the most sterile thing to do is to create it with this seed starting soil. So I've got some here in a bucket, and what I want to stress is the moisture content you want to have in the seed starting soil. We all can imagine the consistency of a wrung out sponge, right? Well, that's kind of the consistency of the soil that I've got here today. Not too wet, not too dry, just right. So the consistency of a wrung out sponge is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this little cell pack to plant these tomatoes in today that I'm going to use to demonstrate with you a little bit later on. Maybe 3 to 4 weeks later, you and I will meet again for another class and carry on with our little seedlings so we know what to do next. I thought that'd be a great idea. But I'm going to fill these little trays, these little cells, about 3/4 full of soil. I'm not going to press that soil down because I don't want to compact it. Remember, these are little bitty babies that are going to be sprouting. So I want to be kind. I want to just put that in. I want to tamp it down and just sort of have it ready to go so that it's about 3/4 full. Now, what I'm going to do is scatter my tomato seeds on the top. But here's another question. How deep should I plant those tomato seeds? How much soil should I put right back on top of them? Our little seed pack is going to be able to answer that question too. This little guy says, seed depth 1/8 of an inch. Boy, that's not very deep, is it? So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to scatter my seeds on top of the soil and then cover it with about 1/8 of an inch of soil. Boy, look at this. Packaged like a professional. So, see how many are in here. Here they are. Ooh, there's maybe, I don't know, less than 20 seeds. So how many seeds should I put in each cell? Well, I'm an optimist at heart, but I like to cover my bets. So I'm going to put 3 seeds in each cell. You can decide yourself, but one of the things that I've learned over the years I've been doing this is it's really good to hedge your bet. We don't want to blow it right off the bat. So I'm going to make sure that if only one of these seeds sprouts, at least I've got one. If all 3 of them sprout, then that's something that you and I can deal with in our next class. We can capitalize on our bounty. So I've scattered 3 seeds in each of those cells, and now I'm just going to sprinkle them with a little more soil. Remember how much? 1/8 of an inch or so. Not a lot, but a little. So we'll just cover that with a little bit of soil. And now what I'm going to do is just give them a little spritz of water. Not a lot, just a little. Remember, that wrung out sponge. Okay. The next thing I want to do is create a greenhouse experience for these little guys. How am I going to do that? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. Saran wrap works remarkably well. Clear plastic sacks work well. So anything you've got in your kitchen that's going to be able to cover that and create sort of a greenhouse experience will work well. We want to do that because we want to make sure that our seedlings stay moist. I'm going to take a second and I'm going to plant those onion seeds. So here's my fun little container again. I've punctured some holes in the bottom so that I've got some drainage, and I'm going to fill that with some soil. Okay, how much soil do I need? Well, I want to make sure that I put enough in there that it's got room to set down its little roots. Kind of the same amount that I had in my other little pack. That ought to do it. Okay, oh no, now I've got a problem. I've been saving these onion seeds year after year after year, and I don't have any seed packet to refer to tell me how deep to plant them. But here's a piece of information I want to share with you. Tuck this in your gardening tool belt because it'll come in handy no matter what. You're going to become a walking encyclopedia of knowledge, and that's going to be a cool thing. One of the rules of thumb about seed starting, especially when it comes to the depth of how deep should I plant these onion seeds, is you want to plant them twice as deep as they are wide. So pick the widest spot on your seeds, because we all know every seed is not the same shape. These are kind of round, and you want to plant them twice as deep as they are wide. So again, I'm looking at maybe 1/8 of an inch. A little bit more, if I put that on them, that'll be fine. So I'm just going to scatter a bunch of onion seeds, and I'm doing this today because onions are really one of those crops that benefit from an early start. So while we could wait a little while on our tomatoes if we wanted to, onions are something that we really should get a head start on. Okay, so I'm going to cover them with a little bit of soil, just enough to just cover their tops. And I'm going to give them a little spritz of water. Not too much, just enough. And this is why these little containers are so cool. It's because it's got its own little cover, and voila, I've got a little greenhouse experience. Now, one of the things that our seeds are requiring, the two things that our seeds are requiring at this stage in the game, is moisture and warmth. So here I've got these planted, and I'm going to think about how I can provide them those two things. Ooh, there's one more thing I want to plant today, and that's parsley. So let me check the back of my packet and see how deep these guys say. They say plant these 1/4 of an inch. But there's a piece of information I forgot to look at. Special germinating instructions. Soak your seeds in water for 12 to 24 hours before planting. Aha, missed that, so I better soak these seeds before I plant them. See how much information is on a seed packet? So I'm going to set these little guys aside, and I'm going to plant them tomorrow, and I'm going to start them early so that they're a nice size transplant when I put them out in the garden. So back to our little guys that we do have planted today. We need to make sure that we provide them a greenhouse type experience, whatever we can do to create a greenhouse experience. This guy has got a cover, and this guy I'm going to cover with a plastic sack or some saran wrap. And then we need to provide them their other requirement, heat. Now this is critical, and this is where I see the biggest mistake happening. It makes sense that the place that I would place these after I've planted them is in my windowsill. But let's think about that for a second. The coldest place in my house on a winter night is up against windows. And if these seeds are requiring heat, and how much heat? Let's check our seed packet. Let's check our seed packet and see how much heat I need to give it. This is the tomatoes, and it's saying temperature for germination, 70 to 90 degrees. That's warm. And I know that at the nighttime temperatures that this soil is going to get, sitting up close to a cold window, it's not going to be 70 to 90 degrees. Remember, these are little babies. You and I are becoming mamas, so we have to give these guys what they're requiring. It's a non-negotiable. So you and I need to get creative on how we can provide them heat. Well, right off the top of my head, the easiest solution is a heating pad. Now, you can get gardening heating pads. Here's one that fits right inside of a windowsill. How fun is that? You can get these at garden centers, hardware stores perhaps, but Google that and find out where heating pads can come from. And they just work well. I mean, they are made to germinate seedlings, and I use them over and over and over, and I find them to be very helpful. But maybe cost is an issue. So let's think, let's get creative, and let's figure out what else we've got as options. One year my cat died, and I took from it, not it, but I took the heating pad that it had been sleeping on, this little kitty heating pad I got at a pet store. It worked remarkably well for starting my seeds. I have warm floors in my house, and so, because I have radiant heat, and so setting my seedling trays on my floor works really well. But I recognize that not everybody has radiant heat. One thing we all do have is a hot water heater. Maybe it's in your basement, or in the mechanical room, or in the garage. But if you're able to use the hot water heater, create some little shelving above it or some little table next to it, and capitalize on the heat that that little unit is putting off, you're golden and ready to go. Remember, what our seedlings are asking for now, what our seeds are really asking for, is moisture and heat. The light requirement comes a little later, so we can fudge here and just find a warm, cozy place for the moment for us to germinate these seeds. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna find that warm spot and we're gonna germinate them. We've created a warm atmosphere, we've created moisture in here, and remember, we're always seeking to find that wrung out sponge material. Sometimes in here, what we do is we create more of a rainforest type experience. So if you find your seedlings are getting too moist, do me a favor and open them up. Let them air out, let them dry out a bit. We don't want them to rot, we don't want them to dampen off. We want them to be just right. So now you can see starting seeds is a big responsibility. It's a lot of work. It's not so much muscle work, it's just work, attention, focus, care. So let's spend our energy wise and let's focus on the details that our seeds are needing when they need it. So once we've started them, moisture and heat is their requirement, okay? So moving along, time goes by and our seeds germinate. How long are we going to be waiting for those to germinate? Again, check the seed packet. It really is helpful because if we got them in a room where they're not getting the light that they're going to need in later on, and I'm going to tell you what that is in just a second, we want to make sure that they don't sprout and start growing without our awareness. So do me a favor again, check the days to emergence, how long we expect them before they show up, and just keep checking on them. Let's take good care of them. So my tomatoes, 5 to 10 days, I'm gonna start checking. And voila, one day I'm gonna come out and I'm going to see life. So here's what's happening. The first leaves that emerge are really not true leaves. They're a leaf called a cotyledon. And these are really mind-blowing. What they are is nature's little energy pack for our seeds. What's gonna happen is these will come up early, and then it will provide energy for our seeds to poke down a little root and to begin to form the true leaves. Remember, these cotyledons do not photosynthesize. They hold within them all of the energy our little seedling is going to need in order to put down a very strong and healthy root, in order to make little solar panels that it's going to emerge later. These are cotyledons, not true leaves. But it is at this point that our seedlings are signaling to us, okay, I needed moisture, I needed warmth. Now, the most important thing I need from you, Mama, is light. So this is where we need to step to the plate again and figure out how are we going to provide our seedlings what they need. And here's what you need to understand. Seedlings, to be strong and healthy and vibrant and stocky little fellows, need 14 to 16 hours of bright light a day. Okay, let's think about that for a moment. Look around your house. Look where you were thinking to put your seedlings. Can you provide them 14 to 16 hours of light a day? The best windows to face them at are south and southwest facing windows. Do you have that in your home? If you don't, what do you have? Do you have something that's going to provide them bright light for 12 hours? If not, then we need to reassess. We need to realize that this isn't our game. This is a living creature that we have invited into our life, and we need to provide it what it's going to require in order to thrive. And that is 14 to 16 hours of light a day. So if you can't do that, you've got a couple options. Grow lights. Grow lights have really accelerated in use. They become cheaper, they become LEDs, they become a lot easier to use. You can get them at hardware stores again, you can get them in seed catalogs, you can get them online, and they're not extremely expensive. I don't use grow lights myself because I'm a lucky little girl and have a greenhouse to use, but if you don't have access to that and your windows are not going to be bright enough to provide those little fellows 14 to 16 hours of light a day, then perhaps seeking and finding out some good grow lights are going to be worthwhile. And I'm hoping that in our Q&A session, somebody here today has experience with grow lights and can shed some light on it for the rest of us. That'll be really cool if you could raise your hand and share that with us. So light becomes the number one issue, okay? Okay, we've gone from seed, we've given them what they needed, we've given them moisture, and we've given them heat. They have sprouted those first leaves called cotyledons, and now they've asked for one thing different. They've asked for light. It is at this point that we can remove the heat from them. Remember, the best place to put them is in that windowsill that you were thinking about earlier. The sun is going to come through during the day and heat the soil up and warm them up, and that'll be great. They may cool down at night, but they've already germinated, and so those warm temperatures at night are not so critical. So now the windowsills become hospitable terrain for our little guys. So check out your house, see what you've got. Remember, we need 14 to 16 hours of light, and see if you can do it. If not, you're going to need to figure out some other way to provide them light, and grow lights are the answer. Okay, so we're going to keep monitoring our seedlings after that. It's going to take them a little while to put on their first true set of leaves, and it's at this point they'll begin to photosynthesize and create their own source of energy. They'll still have some energy packs left in those little first leaves, but we don't need so much to worry about feeding these plants until a little bit later. Once they put on a second true set of leaves, that's where you and I need to rendezvous again, have our second class, and carry on where we've left off. But this whole process is going to take us 3 to 4 weeks to get there. So that's where I'd like to leave this tutorial with you today at that point. You've got a lot to think about, you've got a lot to start, you've got a lot of care before we're ready to move them down the line to the next part of their life cycle. So we are going to open it up to a Q&A in a minute, so think about what you'd like to say. But let me give us a little quick yak on seed saving. Seed saving, I do believe, is really critical to growing a garden. If you're a home gardener and you're trying to get seeds right now, let's use today as an example. We're finding out that seed companies are hard pressed. They're sold out of everything. We may not be able to get seeds in order to plant them on time. So making that something we remember, let's not fall into that trap. Let's learn to save our own seeds. Let's do that. Let's use that as becoming also a source for our community. Seed saving, we used to do it, our forefathers used to do it. It was just how you grew your food. You grew your food, you saved your seeds, you planted them year after year. But there's something really important to know about seed saving. And let's go back to our seed packet to answer this question. In order to save seeds and have those seeds come true, meaning that the seed you saved grows and produces the same, let's use tomatoes as an example, it grows the same tomato as the mother was. It was delicious, it was tender, it was yummy. So we're looking, when we buy our seeds, to buy open pollinated heirloom seeds. Those are the type of seeds that when we save those seeds from mama, they are going to grow the same kind of tomato that mama was. Now there's also something called a hybrid seed. Don't confuse this with genetically modified. A hybrid seed means that it was bred from two different genetic parents. This parent had a mixed bag of genetics, this parent had a mixed bag of genetics. But when you cross them, they produced a certain type of tomato. But when you save that tomato seed and try to plant it again, you are going to get a tomato, but you have no idea what kind of tomato you're going to get. It's a mixed genetic bag, remember. So you're going to get a tomato that maybe doesn't look or taste at all like the tomato you saved. So always look for open pollinated heirloom seeds. It's printed right on your pack, and it's going to assure you an ability to save seeds over and over and over. And one of the really amazing things to me about seed saving is that these little fellows are going to alter themselves slightly to learn to grow year after year after year in your particular garden. They're going to adjust their DNA, they're going to adjust their genetics for you. And so when you save them over and over and over, season after season after season, you yourself are developing a strain of seeds that does well in your area. That's a really smart and cool thing to have for you, for your children, and for your community. So I highly, highly suggest that this year, think about becoming a seed saver. And we don't have to save seeds until later in the season. And how about if you and I rendezvous then, do another class on seed saving, learn and teach ourselves how to do that. I think that's a really good idea. Okay, so this is where you guys get to chime in. This is where you get to raise your hand and ask your questions. I've got a moderator. I'm going to hand it over to her, and I'm ready for the first question. Louise, thank you for this question. You are a rock star. This is brilliant, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up for the crew here today. So, one of the things that has surprised me over my growing seasons is the viability that exists within seeds. Now, I know we tend to buy seeds year after year after year, but it'll blow your mind to realize how much viability probably still exists within many of those seeds. And here's a simple way you can test them. Take a paper towel and scatter a few of those seeds on it and moisten that paper towel. I like to set it next to my sink in the kitchen because I'm there a lot, and I make sure that that paper towel never gets dry. Then I look at my seed packet and I just take note how many days to emergence, how long it's going to take before those seeds start to sprout, and which gives me a little window to guess. And then I'm just going to watch them for maybe those 5 to 10 days with this tomato, and I'm going to see if they begin to swell, if they begin to show signs of life, like poking out a little root. If you see that, then you know that those seeds are alive, and by all means, go ahead and plant them. That's also why I like to plant more than one seed in each cell. If I've got some seeds that are a little older, heck, put several in each cell. You can always prick them out or transplant them out later. But my suggestion to you is try that viability test. I think what you're going to learn is that seeds are far more resilient than you thought. And some varieties of seeds last longer than other varieties. Here's an example. One year, like you, Louise, I had a lot of tomato seeds that I had saved year after year, and they were 10 years old. I planted them, and I had a shocking 70% viability return. So it just was a little lesson for me to take note and realize a lot of times seeds are stronger than I thought. Other seeds, not so much so. Onion seeds tend not to have such viability. Lettuce seeds tend to expire sooner, but it's just kind of a gamut there. And so that simple test is an easy way to decide that. Does that help? Yeah. Okay, good question. So here's the fact. You can start your tomatoes in January if you want to, but what you need to take note of is you're going to have shrubbery by the time they're ready to go out at the end of May. So if you want to start your tomatoes today, go for it, but be informed that you're going to need to move them more up into bigger pots. We don't want them to get root bound. So my guess is if I were to start tomato seeds today, I would need to move them up maybe 2 times before they were ready to go out in the garden, from a 4-inch pot to a gallon pot. And even then I might run the risk of being root bound, or maybe I will have neglected them in some way, or maybe they didn't get enough food or whatever. The simpler you can make it, remember, the more fun you're gonna have and the easier it's gonna be. But there's nothing to say you can't start them today. It's just gonna require more effort, and you're right. It's probably gonna require moving them into larger pots a few more times. So you get to decide that. Okay, so remember that wrung out sponge is our guidepost. And my experience is that when I cover them, because I want to create, that greenhouse effect while they are germinating, that I don't tend to run on the dry side. My problem has been too much moisture. So opening them up and airing them out is probably what's going to happen more often than going down the other road of being too dry in that early stage in the greenhouse. Once they've germinated and they're beginning to grow, it's not so necessary to have that greenhouse experience. You can remove that, take off that saran wrap and whatever, and then what you're likely to experience is more on the dry side than the rainforest. So just watch it, but keep in mind that rule of thumb, that wrung out sponge, it's the perfect moisture content for our seedlings. And so however you can arrive there, at least it gives you something to shoot for. Yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah. And I forgot to mention too, make sure when you're planting your seeds, and I know this sounds super simple, but boy, I've blown it so many times in my life about this, make sure that you mark your seeds. Write on there what you planted. I know that we all think, oh, I'll remember, I won't forget, but it is interesting how easy it is to say, now what was that again? I don't remember. Or what variety of tomato was that? I don't remember. So make sure that putting a little marker in your seeds is part of your process here. It's going to pay off big later. I've planted a lot of mystery plants in my garden to have to go all through the season to figure out what they were. So this little tip is going to save you that. I hope I'm inspiring you guys today to really get your hands in the dirt and start your seeds. I know it is information that, my grandmother used to teach my mother, and my mother taught me. And so it used to be generation by generation, that's what we did. We passed that information down. And then we got modern on ourselves, and hey, that wasn't so bad either. But now we're beginning to see the value, the importance of starting garden starts. And it's really phenomenal if you can include kids in your little sessions. Kids love to get their hands in the dirt. And I've taught a lot of kids over the years, and they just can't get enough of seed starting. So include those little buggers when you can. And it's also planting seeds in their little minds. It's teaching them that this is a really important skill. This is part of being a human being, growing food, and it just sort of resets our caliber and sets us out on another road, carrying with us, moving forward with these skills that are really critical, to our life. So, rah, kids, whenever you can include them. That is a sign that your plants are not getting enough light. Once your seedlings have emerged and you've put them in the window of choice that you think is going to provide enough light for them, like Rob said, they're going to reach for the light. And if your seedlings are getting really long and lanky and their stems are really wimpy and they tend to want to fall over, that is a sign to you that they're not getting enough light. And so you'll need to supplement that in one way or another. Remember, our goal is to have really stocky, healthy plants. And so long and lanky is a signal to you from them that they're requiring more light. Thank you, Rob. Thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it more than you know. Inspires me to do more, to be better, and away we'll go. So you guys take care. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the moments you're going to be spending with your C's. You're rock stars. You got this. Check for your recording. You can check back and see what the questions and answers were. Find some more information, and I'll check in with you next time. See you later.